This is the mop-up. The fighting continues in Iran. There's no peace deal. There isn't going to be one until Trump resigns. Iran attacked another oil tanker in Hormuz today. Of course, the United States, for the second night in a row, launched aerial attacks in response. The ceasefire threadbare, the peace talks a joke, and I'm going to discuss it all tomorrow night when I go live. That's Sunday night at 6:05 p.m. I'm not going to talk about Iran tonight. Tomorrow, I'll talk about the 50 people who have died in ICE custody since Donald Trump returned to office in January of 2025. So far, there have been 20 deaths that we know of in ICE custody this year. There were 33 last year, which was a record for ICE, and only 11, well, not only, but 11 in 2024. Why am I doing a show if I'm not going to talk about ICE or Iran? I have no life. That's why I decided to go live this evening. My new schedule? I go live every Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday at 6:05 p.m. Eastern. Saturday nights at 8:30 p.m., I run a highlight episode, a look back at the week. And I've stuck to this schedule for 3 months, and it looks like it's sustainable, except tonight, instead of highlights, I figured I'd go live and talk because, well, I have nothing else to do with my life, which I really don't have other than this show. Yes, it's very sad. I mean, I have friends, but I've been fighting with my close ones, especially in the past week. The ones in New York City, the ones who don't really like Zohran Mamdani. Yeah, he scored the hat trick this week and pretty much got 3 new members of Congress elected, all of whom perceived to be incredibly dangerous radicals. They're perceived to be so by some of my friends who, call themselves Democrats, and I can feel the rage building up inside of me. These people, they call themselves Democrats, but when it comes to Mamdani and these 3 new members of Congress, they're going to Congress. They won the primaries in New York City, which means the general election doesn't mean anything. Although we saw what happened, that has the mayor of Buffalo. They elected a socialist mayor of Buffalo in the primaries, and then the banking interests went after her. So the point I'm making is I need new friends. You probably shouldn't even listen to this show itself. It's a self-indulgent cry for attention. I have nothing to do on a Saturday night. And I'm pissed off at a lot of my friends here in New York City. There are some people very close to me in my life whose true colors haven't been revealed until I caught the reaction to Mamdani getting 3 new members of Congress elected. Look, I'm left of center. I'm not a communist. I'm also not a capitalist. I believe in democracy. I believe in equal rights for all, equal dignity for all, and I believe in a baseline that all Americans are entitled to, like free health care, free daycare, free food, free education. This is not a big lift. It's just human decency. There's a lot going on. There really is. And, sometimes I don't catch up to speed as quickly on things, as quickly as my children do. They see the urgency of the moment. Yeah, I see it, but I don't feel it. I see it, but not with the clarity my children do. And that's one of the reasons I absolutely adore Zohran Mamdani, my mayor, and AOC. They are young enough to be my children. And our children, as we get older, are supposed to take care of me. I love Mamdani and I love AOC, partly out of self-interest. I get a sense they're going to take care of me, even though my generation, the baby boomers, we don't deserve to get taken care of. When you look back, we took, some of us, not me, but my generation, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So our parents were the greatest generation. Newtonian physics dictates that baby boomers have to be the worst generation. We are the worst generation. We don't deserve to be taken care of. But I get a sense that my mayor, Mamdani, and AOC, when she becomes my president, they will take care of me. They will forgive our generation. So, full disclosure, Howie Klein, a day doesn't go by that I don't think about Howie Klein, and you can still read his work over Down with Tyranny. He is still is my moral compass, as is Ralph Nader, but Howie Klein, very important in my life. And back in 2018, he endorsed AOC. And he called me, says, "You want to interview AOC?" Now, he said, even though she has no chance of defeating the incumbent Democrat Joe Crowley in the primaries, Howie said, "I got to be honest with you, she doesn't stand a chance. Joe Crowley, the Democrat from Queens, bagman for Wall Street, there's no way AOC is going to beat him. But do you want her on the show anyway?" And I said, Howie, thanks for the offer. I hope she wins, but I need to talk to candidates who have a serious chance of winning. I said that. A day didn't go by that Howie didn't remind me of that, and I own it. I said it. Howie, who was raising money for AOC, said, "I love her, but she doesn't stand a chance." We were both wrong, but I was way more wronger than Howie Klein. Yes, I was more wronger than Howie Klein. The moral arc of the universe, according to Dr. King, bends towards justice, he says, but it takes time for all of us to bend it. It takes time. Barack Obama quoted Dr. King's speech about the moral arc of the universe slowly bending. He always quoted Dr. King about the moral arc of the universe slowly bending whenever President Obama needed to counsel patience. But, what Dr. King also railed against was the very same incrementalism that Barack Obama built his entire presidency around. It was Barack Obama who described our nation as a gigantic oil tanker that doesn't do a 180 overnight. Well, yeah. I mean, it would be nice if he were wrong, but, I remember how hard it was for Barack Obama when he got elected. I'll go over everything. He's a disappointment, but this country is a disappointment. And I still love Barack Obama. I'm an apologist for Barack Obama while I point my finger at him and say, "You're responsible for Donald Trump." So, yeah. Believe it or not, it was really tough for President Obama to govern. Yes, he was swept into office. He didn't beat McCain by a landslide, but it was a landslide. He had control of both chambers of Congress, And for one brief moment, he also had a filibuster-proof majority in the Senate. A lot of people come on this show and trash Obama, saying he could have gotten everything he wanted. He had a filibuster-proof majority in the Senate. He had 60 votes. We could have had single payer. Well, sometimes you got to look back and find out what the truth is and tell people. His filibuster-proof majority, he had Harry Reid, the Democratic Senate Majority Leader, running the Senate, and he had Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the House, when he was sworn into office in 2009. He had a filibuster-proof majority in the Senate for about 7 months. Didn't last long. Now, you got to remember, Obama was sworn in the year 2009. He didn't get a filibuster-proof majority in the Senate immediately. He was one vote shy. Why? Because Senator Al Franken of Minnesota couldn't get sworn in until July of 2009 because his election was so close. It didn't get certified. So they were shy one vote. But in July of 2009, Obama had a filibuster-proof majority in the Senate, and that lasted until Ted Kennedy died on us. His seat was taken by Republican Scott Brown in a special election. Scott Brown, Republican. So for 7 months out of Obama's 2 terms, 7 months out of 8 years, Barack Obama had a filibuster-proof majority. For 7 months out of 8 years, Obama had a filibuster-proof majority in the Senate, and that presupposes that all 60 Democratic senators were as progressive as we wanted them to be. They're not all 60. Remember Joe Manchin of West Virginia, who should rot in hell? It's not that easy. Yes, I point my finger in Obama's face and say, you're responsible for Trump. You caused this. But I'm also an apologist for Barack Obama, whom I love. The Democratic Senate Majority Leader, back then when Obama was president, his name was Harry Reid, Nevada Democrat. Not a good guy. Most people from Nevada, especially Democrats, aren't. You gotta straddle the fence because Nevada is a very corrupt, backward state, but built on vice. And Democrats who come out of Nevada have to straddle the issues because it's not as progressive as we want it to be. I believe Trump carried Nevada last time around, which even Hillary and Joe Biden carried Nevada. Harry Reid was President Obama's benefactor before Obama became our president. Harry Reid in the Senate said to Obama, when he joined the Senate briefly, he said to Obama, you have no future here, but you could be our next president. Harry Reid recognized Obama's greatness and that he was an alpha dog who was impatient and couldn't rise as high up the leadership in the Democratic Party to satisfy both his ambition and his genius. Say what you want about President Obama. He is a genius, flawless, seamless, and a good man, a very good man. Probably of all our presidents in modern American history, he's the best man in terms of morality. Not how he governed, but character counts. Politics is complicated, government is complicated, so we have to trust the people we elect to have character and try to keep their promises or apologize for not keeping them, which to some degree Barack Obama has done. Well, Harry Reid, the Senate leader, said to Obama in about 2006, you should run for president. You have what it takes. Pretty prescient and a great leap of faith on Harry Reid's part because Barack Hussein Obama. So Harry Reid saw something, and Harry Reid, his chief of staff, moved over to help Obama. And Obama knew when he got elected president that he not only owed Harry Reid, he saw that Harry Reid was Senate Majority Leader. So he had to work with Reid, and once he became president. And as I told you, Reid was, let's just say he wasn't progressive. He reined President Obama in, although some would argue Obama didn't need that much restraint as president because, let's face it, Obama, Harvard Law School, was always a corporatist and a capitalist. But since Mamdani won, Obama has been incredibly supportive of Mamdani. Didn't campaign for him, didn't give him a full-throated endorsement, but he's showing up now for him, and that says a lot. It shows where a portion, a chamber of Obama's heart resides. It was during this brief period in between 2009 and 2010 when Obama had a filibuster-proof Senate. And this is where it gets complicated, and this is where I'm an apologist for Obamacare, because I'm going to talk about Obamacare, I think. I don't know exactly what I'm looking at notes, I'm looking at slides, but I think I'm going to talk about Obamacare, which is a love letter to the health insurance company, and also Obamacare created Donald Trump. But these were the circumstances that led to this garbage piece of legislation, Obamacare. It passed in the Senate when Obama had a filibuster-proof Senate. But then it goes back and forth between the Senate and the House of Representatives. We've gone over how bills become law. And when it's time for a bill to be finalized, the Senate votes on it again. When it came time to vote on the final version of Obamacare, the Democrats no longer had a filibuster-proof majority in the Senate, right? Because when it passed, they had 60, then it got worked on by the members of Congress, House of Representatives, and then it has to come back to the Senate to vote on the final version. By the time the final version went before the Senate, they didn't have a filibuster-proof majority. And by the way, I trash Al Franken on this show because he's trying to rewrite history and claim he was forced to resign. I've gone over the allegations. There are at least 10 women who are going to step forward and claim they were sexually harassed and or touched by Al Franken. A lot of liberals and Democrats don't want to deal with the truth about Al Franken, and that is he's a pig. So they say he was driven out of office. It was the Me Too movement overreact. No, he was a pig. Al Franken is a pig and didn't deserve to be a United States senator. I've been over this. Google all the women who came forward about Al Franken. If he was innocent, he could have gone before the ethics committee. He chickened out. He didn't want to put his wife and family through it because there were at least 10 women. So he's a pig and should never have been elected Senate. People knew he was a pig, but they kept their mouths shut when he was running. But to his credit, besides being one of my heroes in comedy, we wouldn't have Obamacare if it weren't for Al Franken. In 2009, when he finally got seated, he they had a retreat for Senate Democrats, and David Axelrod and some top White House officials were talking to the Senate, and they didn't plan on health care reform. And it was Al Franken with his filthy mouth who said, you better effing get some kind of health care reform. What the hell are you doing here if you're not going to reform health care? So Al Franken, really more than anybody in the Senate in 2009, jump-started health care reform, which turned into this dud, Obamacare. So it's a little more complicated. People are complicated. You can't have moral and intellectual certitude, especially when it comes to governing. It was during during this brief window of Obama having a filibuster-proof Senate that the Senate passed Obamacare. But by the time the final version had to be voted on, he didn't have a filibuster-proof Senate. Scott Brown, the Republican from Massachusetts, was now the senator. And Obamacare had to be passed through this process you're all familiar with called reconciliation. It's a Senate rule. None of this has to do, the filibuster is not in the Constitution. These are Senate rules. And you can throw out Senate rules if you want. Reconciliation is a process by which a piece of legislation gets passed with a simple majority in the Senate. It's filibuster-proof. You just need 51 votes. That's Senate rules. And Senate rules dictate, for the most part, that reconciliation can only be used to pass budget bills. There have been some people in the Biden administration who wanted to extend reconciliation to civil rights bills, but back in 2010, when Obamacare was about to be signed into law, in order to get Obamacare passed in the Senate in the final version, Harry Reid, who was the Senate majority leader, who was the traffic cop, he presented Obamacare in order to get it passed through reconciliation as a budget bill. A lot of people thought that was cheating, but for the final vote in the Senate, in order to pass it through reconciliation, it was introduced as a budget bill. It wasn't, in a way it was, you do what you can do when you want to pass meaningful legislation that really wasn't so meaningful, although there's some great things in Obamacare. Pre-existing conditions, keeping young adults on their parents' health care plan. It's good. The problem is Obamacare stinks. And it's not really Barack Obama's fault, but it is. It's the definition of incrementalism, which Dr. King railed against. The problem with incrementalism is it gives Republicans time to roll back whatever gains you've made. The genius of Obamacare legislatively is it had three stools. I don't want to go into it, but Paul Krugman wrote extensively about the genius of Obamacare because of its three stools. It was nearly impossible. Not three stools. Three stools are what you'll find in a car seat after Donald Trump gets up from it. Three legs to the stool. There are three-legged stools. Three legs in the stool, kind of like Jeffrey Dahmer's stools. You'd often find three legs in Jeffrey Dahmer. You're talking about Jeffrey Dahmer having legs in his stool? What is wrong with you? Yes, he did have legs in his stool, but I'm talking about the other kind of stool. Paul Krugman, the economist, Nobel Prize-winning economist, described legislatively Obamacare as a three-legged stool, meaning it's almost impossible for the Republicans to destroy. But over time, they have succeeded in destroying what the Supreme Court didn't do, like the mandate, the individual mandate. Obamacare said you had to have health insurance. You had to have it, which is pretty bold. You had to have health care in this country. Supreme Court said no. And it also mandated that all 50 states take what is called Medicaid expansion. So they would be flush with cash to handle Americans who can't get health care from their employer, their union, and don't have enough money to go on the Obamacare marketplace to buy a policy individually. They had a thing called Medicaid expansion. And it forced every state in the country to take billions of dollars in extra Medicare money to cover Americans who can't afford health insurance. It was almost Medicaid for all in a way, but not quite. And then the Supreme Court said, no, Medicaid expansion is unconstitutional. The individual mandate is unconstitutional. So Obamacare has been stripped over the years. What Obama originally wanted was a public option. He didn't introduce Obamacare with a public option because the votes in the Senate were not there. Even with a filibuster-proof majority, these Democrats aren't going to stand up to the health insurance companies. The public option was genius. And you got to give Obama credit for even thinking about a public option, because a public option would have eventually put the health insurance companies out of business. It was a Trojan horse. And I think the road to single payer, Medicare for all, or Medicaid for all, was the public option. Yes, it was incrementalism. This is incrementalism, but the road to single payer, I still believe, is paved by a public option, as long as you keep electing Democrats. That's the problem with incrementalism. Public option means you can buy your health insurance from United Healthcare or Anthem Blue Cross or Aetna, or you can purchase your health care through the government, that the government would get into the business of selling health insurance policies. That's different from Medicare, different from Medicaid, different from Social Security. You go to the government and you buy health insurance, and then they send you bills. You got to pay premiums. You got to pay. Medicare has that. If you're on Medicare, you get billed. Medicare isn't completely free. But once the government provided a public option meaning government-run health insurance company, competing with United Healthcare and Aetna, once you get them being forced to compete with the United States government, over time, more Americans will choose the health insurance program sold by the government because it will be better and cheaper. Why? There's no profit motive, just efficiency. Everything the government does is better than corporate America. It just is. So that would put the health insurance companies out of business. And then, without the health insurance companies, you don't have lobbyists blocking single payer. We never even got to a public option. So now you know what a public option is. Most of you don't. Because you just don't. But now you know what it means. The health insurance companies blocked it from even being considered to be a leg of the Obamacare stool. Why? Obama wanted it. The votes weren't there. The votes weren't there in the Senate. Just because the Democrats have a filibuster-proof majority, it doesn't mean a lot of those senators aren't Joe Manchin. Remember Joe Manchin of West Virginia, whose daughter, by the way, should be in prison for price gouging. She ended up becoming a drug executive. I think it was the EpiPen. Somebody leave a comment. But I think it was Joe Manchin's daughter who was guilty of price gouging for the EpiPen. So that's who Joe Manchin is of West Virginia. He's gone. And now we have an actual Republican now in his seat. Problem with Obamacare is over time, it's become, you want to call it a failure? You want to speak the truth? It's a failure, especially since the expiration of the Biden-era Obamacare subsidies at the end of last year. Well, what are the Biden-era Obamacare subsidies that expired at the end of last year? When you sign up for health insurance on the Obamacare marketplace, you can't afford it. So the government subsidizes your health insurance. You don't get the money. The health insurance companies get that money. And then at the height of COVID, Joe Biden introduced expanded subsidies. They're called expanded subsidies under, they already had subsidies. Biden expanded the subsidies, and those subsidies had a clock ticking on it, an expiration date. They expired on December 31st, 2025. That was the big debate. And the Republicans let the Biden-era Obamacare subsidies expire at the end of last year. There's still subsidies there, but the Biden-era subsidies expired, and millions of Americans who signed up for Obamacare are losing their health insurance because they can't pay the premiums without the Biden-era subsidies. So Obamacare, the insurance through Obamacare, is specifically designed for Americans who don't have health insurance provided to them through their employer or union. See, employer or union health care is what the system wants, because I can't tell you the number of jobs I stayed in with abusive half men for bosses because I needed the health insurance, not just me, my family. So I ate a lot of dung for the health insurance. If we had single payer, bosses would have to be nice because you would say, take this job and shove it. But if the boss controls whether or not you're going to live or die because they provide your health insurance, yes, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. Well, there are many Americans who have jobs that don't provide health benefits. They qualify supposedly for Obamacare. There are many Americans who are just self-employed or unemployed. They're under the age of, 65, where you qualify for Medicare. So they don't qualify for Medicaid because they make too much money. They're too young for Medicare, so they go on the Obamacare marketplace and buy health insurance, not from the government. That would have been the public option. They buy from health insurance company like Aetna, Anthem Blue Cross, the usual suspects who are guilty of the crime. And Obamacare subsidies, that money goes straight to the health insurance companies. That's why health insurance companies continue, 16 years? Obamacare got implemented when? In 2011? For the past 14 years, health insurance companies book record profits because of Obamacare. And so there is a germ of truth to Trump and Republicans complaining that Obamacare drives up the cost of health care in this country because we're throwing money at the health insurance companies with these subsidies. The government is subsidizing health insurance companies, for-profit health insurance companies. When you throw money at private health insurance companies, they raise prices because they have to grow. Every quarter, they have to show more profits. So they charge the government more. Again, some of those subsidies didn't get renewed December 31st, 2025. Again, under Biden, those subsidies for Obamacare were increased, and they expired on December 31st, 2025. By allowing the Biden-era Obamacare subsidies to expire, parts of the gravy train for health insurance companies were slightly cut off, but now, as predicted, so has health insurance for millions and millions and millions of Americans. This is why we need a public option, single payer, Medicare for all, or Medicaid for all. The Wall Street Journal out with a report this morning saying 4 million people who signed up for Obamacare this year after the Obamacare subsidies expired on December 31st, 2025, 4 million are now unable to pay their premiums and no longer have health insurance. And they can't apply for Medicaid because they have too much money. They make too much money to qualify for Medicaid, but not enough money to be able to afford health insurance. So they have no health insurance. It is estimated that by the end of the year, as many as 40% of the people who have Obamacare health insurance plans right now, 40% of them will probably have zero health insurance going into 2027 when the new Congress is sworn in. January 3rd is when we swear in the new Congress. So this was anticipated by the Republicans. They saw this coming when they passed their signature One Big Beautiful Bill, and Trump signed it into law on July 4th, 2025. One Big Beautiful Bill signed into law on July 4th, 2025, anticipated that millions of Americans would be losing health insurance by the end of 2026. So Republicans passed a bill, One Big Beautiful Bill, that strategically waited until after the 2026 midterms for the cruelty to kick in. How did they plan for this? If you completely lose your health insurance, what do? Well, you try to apply for Medicaid, but you make too much money. And then in One Big Beautiful Bill, they have work requirements for Medicaid if you're, quote unquote, able-bodied. Those work requirements kick in January of 2027. If you lose your Obamacare insurance plan, you're going to try, if you lose your job, you're going to try to apply for Medicaid. And starting in 2027, so-called able-bodied Americans will not qualify for Medicaid or food stamps unless they're either working or can show proof that they're going to school or that they can't find a job, but they're looking for a job, or they are caretakers at home. These are the work requirements. And to ensure more and more working Americans can't qualify for Medicaid, in One Big Beautiful Bill, the Republicans slapped layer upon layer of paperwork onto the work requirements. Paperwork impossible to fill out. This needs to be notarized, and well, you know how that goes, right? Each state administers Medicaid individually, and they don't want to spend the Medicaid money, so they create massive amounts of paper for you to fill out. It's also, thanks to One Big Beautiful Bill, what they're doing with work requirements for food stamps. Now, they've tried work requirements for food stamps in Iowa and Georgia, and they found out that administering the paperwork for food stamps was more expensive than just giving people food stamps if they needed it. It's cheaper to trust Americans when they say they need food stamps than it is to set up these massive bureaucracies making sure people are working. And it's not the government that's checking to see if you're working. It's private contractors who donate to the Republican Party. So it's way more expensive to have work requirements for food stamps. We learned that in Georgia. We learned it in Iowa. The bureaucracy is more expensive than just saying, hey, you know what? We're the wealthiest country in the world. So what if somebody's gaming the system with food stamps? We got way bigger problems with the oil companies and the health insurance companies and the military-industrial complex gaming the system for trillions and trillions of dollars. But what the one big beautiful bill is going to do to food stamps and Medicaid with these work requirements, it's literally death from paperwork. Put so many documents in front of someone who is struggling, that in and of itself is cruelty. You put so many documents in front of them, they throw up their hands and decide, you know what, it's easier for me to starve or not have any medical coverage at all than it is for me to try to get food stamps or Medicaid. The work proving that you're working requires more work than actually working. And this is partly why Bobby Kennedy Jr. is our head of Health and Human Services. This is one of the reasons this nut job, Bobby Kennedy Jr., whose brain has been sucked clean by worms, he was put in charge of Health and Human Services to trick low information voters, people in danger of losing their health insurance, that they're better off not being able to see a doctor because doctors are dangerous. Vaccines are dangerous. Science is dangerous. No, you're better off not getting health insurance from your government. That's the role Bobby Kennedy plays. He sows just enough distrust in medical science and our food chain so that Americans who can't afford a doctor or who can't afford to eat, he gives them hope. He makes it easier for these people to resign themselves to thinking, you know what, I'm better off without a doctor. I'm better off without food. Next year, work requirements mean the growing number of Americans applying for Medicaid and food stamps will be inundated by paperwork. Form 30, and then, okay, I see you fill it now, I need Form 36. And your boss didn't fill out Form 32, and the technical training school you claim to be at filled out the wrong form. And the people saying that, they're private contractors gouging the federal government. They're more expensive than just giving Americans Medicaid or food stamps. But Republicans would rather give the money to wealthy donors who gum up the works when it comes to food stamps and Medicaid. They'd rather see Americans starve to death and die from lack of health care. They'd rather see that happen so that their friends can have jobs denying people. Where's the paperwork? You didn't mail it in. It's also what Republicans are going to do right now with the SAVE Act. This is the big voting bill that Donald Trump wants passed. There was supposed to be a big housing bill ready for his signature. Now, I don't know how good or bad. I don't know enough about the housing bill. I'm sure it's problematic. But there was a housing bill ready for his signature. And at the last minute, he pulled the rug out from underneath his speaker, Mike Johnson, and John Thune, Senate Majority Leader. I'm not signing the bill until you pass the SAVE Act. And what is the SAVE Act? It is a bill that makes it impossible for poor people to vote. Now, they're already doing it in some states with voter ID. And the idea with the SAVE Act, they don't say it, but it's requiring 2 forms of voter ID. And that's a form of a poll tax, which is illegal. In other words, charging people to vote because it costs money to get the ID you need right now in some states to vote. And if the SAVE Act passes, then everybody is going to have to prove they're a United States citizen, and that requires 2 forms of ID. Republicans don't want poor people to vote, so by surreptitiously requiring 2 forms of ID to vote, poor people can't do it. Cannot do it. So the SAVE Act requires proof of citizenship. Seems honest, right? Oh, proof of citizenship. Well, first, the Brennan Center, every study shows it is literally the number of non-citizens who have been caught voting after billions of ballots cast is 0.0000001% or lower. Well, what is lower than that? 0. Doesn't happen. Non-citizens are not voting. Maybe accidentally voting, but they're caught. So it's not a problem. It's a handful over a 40-year period. I think it was the American Enterprise, or maybe it was Cato, said like maybe since 2005, 40 people who weren't citizens accidentally voted, and they got caught. Well, the SAVE Act is designed to prevent poor people from voting because you have to prove that you're a United States citizen. A photo ID, and I just found this out, a photo ID, for example, a driver's license, is not proof of citizenship. A birth certificate is. Good luck finding your birth certificate. The SAVE Act, they don't say this explicitly, but it's surreptitiously demanding that in order to vote in America, you have to produce 2 forms of ID. So, can you prove, think about this, can you prove to me you're an American citizen? My Hispanic listeners can. I guarantee you now, every Hispanic listener can show proof that they're here legally. But if you're white, are your papers in order? Mine aren't. Do you have 2 forms of ID? Do you have a driver's license? Well, you have to know how to drive. Not every American. Believe it or not, some people take mass transit. Some people don't have driver's licenses because they can't afford a car, or they believe in saving the planet and don't want to drive, or they're blind and they can't drive. Do you have a driver's license? Do you? That's one photo ID, but that doesn't prove you're a United States citizen because we give driver's licenses to people who aren't citizens. Abrego Garcia had a driver's license. That didn't so he couldn't pass as a United States citizen. Well, you know what proves you're a U.S. citizen? Your passport. Your passport. How many I think 40% of Americans have passports. I think it's even lower. If more Americans had passports and traveled, we'd be a much smarter country. So do you have 2 of the following? Do you have a driver's license? Do you have a passport? Do you have a Social Security card? I know you might collect Social Security, but do you have a card? a Social Security card? Do you have a birth certificate? Can you prove to ICE? No, the library card doesn't work. Credit card doesn't work. Can you prove to ICE you're a citizen? No, you can't. So why don't you just come with us and we'll detain you in a for-profit prison until someone can show proof that you're a citizen. Well, suppose you don't have any loved ones who can get your birth certificate, who can find your Social Security card while you languish away in a for-profit detention facility. That's the plan. See, these for-profit detention centers need to be filled up, and they get something like $250 a day per bed. The idea is to throw American citizens into these for-profit detention facilities and keep you there for as long as possible. Can't make a phone call, can't contact them. We hear countless stories of American citizens stuck inside these for-profit detention facilities for weeks, unable to call their loved ones, unable to call a lawyer. So how are you going to get your loved one to get your birth certificate or your Social Security card? Well, it takes time to get a Social Security card sent to you in the mail. It takes money. It takes money to get your Social Security card or your birth certificate, and especially your passport. It's what I'm going through right now. It's what I can't get paid because I can't prove under the current regime that I'm a United States citizen. And if the SAVE Act passes, I won't be allowed to vote. I just found out my passport expired. It doesn't have a picture of our turd president on it. You know, the turd's face is on the new passports, the freedom passports. I guess they're being ironic by calling them freedom passports with that effing turd's face on it, worthless turd of a president. So I just found out my passport is expired, and I worked for a company last month, did some work for them, and they won't pay me until I show them proof of my citizenship. So I emailed them a photograph of my driver's license. That's still good. Turns out this sucker, my passport, expired 3 years ago. Not good enough for the employer. Partly, it's not the employer's fault, but it's one of the ways these laws subsidize big business because I can't get paid. It slows the process down. The longer it takes for this company to pay me, the more working capital they have. And they collect interest on the money they owe me. That money is sitting somewhere collecting interest. That's a form, by creating all these obstacles to paying employees, it creates more cash for corporate America. The longer it takes to pay me, the less it costs to pay me. Now, I should demand the interest they're collecting on that money. There should be a law that says if an employer doesn't pay you after 2 weeks, for whatever reason, that money is held in escrow and the interest goes to the worker. Try asking for the interest. Try it. So here's what I'm going through. And I have a choice. And I haven't made up my mind yet. Actually, I made up my mind and I got screwed by a company that a private contractor that expedites passports. And I'm going to give you their name on the next show. Okay, so it costs money to get your passport renewed. It's not free, a couple $100. $500 for it to be expedited through this private company that I gave some money to, and then I realized $500. So I'm not going to get paid in the next 60 days. I can't produce my birth certificate. I guess I could. My mother's dead. My father's gone. Where's my birth certificate? I kept my circumcision certificate. I do have, I wonder if that will, I keep my circumcision certificate. My Social Security card. I know I was told it was issued to me when I was born. Well, maybe it's free. Maybe I can get SSA to mail me my Social Security card. Who knows how long that's going to take, thanks to Elon Musk's Doja cuts. The point is, my papers are not in order. If I get pulled over by ICE and they say, "Are you an American citizen?" I can't prove it. I have an expired passport, and I have a driver's license, which means nothing. I don't have a Social Security card. I don't have a birth certificate. And this administration, this regime, is empowering those ICE thugs. You can have you ever done time? Because I haven't done time. I spent a night in jail. These ICE detention facilities, they're like Rikers Island. So if you have to spend time in an ICE detention facility until your loved ones can find the documents, that's punishment. You can't have that. That's torture. And I know my loved ones. We're working on it. Those are my effing loved ones. So you need your proof of your cable bill? No, I need my Social Security. Oh, I thought you said you needed proof that you paid your cable bill. It's going to be another month. We feel real. I mean, those are pretty much all my loved ones. They'll slow walk my release from an ICE detention facility. So that's the SAVE Act, part of the SAVE Act. If you're a woman and you changed your name because you married some POS, and then you divorce him and now you have a different name, you can't vote. Or you got to pay hundreds of dollars to prove you are who you say you are. That's if the SAVE Act passes. One big, beautiful bill is going to make Americans jump through hoops to qualify for food and medicine. And the SAVE Act, which hasn't passed, is going to make it so only rich people can afford to vote, because it costs hundreds of dollars to prove you're a United States citizen. This is the Mop Up. I'm David. I'm glad I did this show because I don't know if anybody's here, but I'm glad I did this show. Usually on Saturday nights, I put a highlight reel together. I'm live every Sunday night at 6:05, every Tuesday night at 6:05, and every Thursday night at 6:05. 3 months. Some people said I couldn't keep the schedule. I think I missed one night. So This is so I decided Saturday night I'm filled with so much piss and vinegar, and I don't really want to talk about the specifics of what's going on in the news. And I figured if I do a Saturday show where I just ramble, I can get some things out of my system. And then for Sunday night show at 6:05 p.m. Eastern, I can talk about what's actually going on that day. By the way, go to davidfeldmanshow.com and pick up, if you want to support this garbage show of mine, go to shopdavidfeldman.com and pick up a Hope You're in the Mood for Diarrhea. Hang on for 1 second. I actually have a Hope You're in the Mood for Diarrhea apron, which I will be wearing. This is my big seller over at Shop David Feldman. It's for real, and I had to get a new one. It just arrived today. Hope You're in the Mood for Diarrhea. Hope You're in the Mood for Diarrhea. It's an apron that you wear at your barbecue. If you're hosting a barbecue or you're cooking for people, if you're having a dinner party, you come inside and say, hope you're in the mood for diarrhea. That's the apron that you can buy over at shopdavidfeldman.com or leave a donation. Better yet, just leave a donation. Don't buy this. You don't need it. You can buy a Scream coffee mug. You can buy, what do we have there? Trump 2028. My nephew, Leonard, printed up all these T-shirts and hoodies and cups, and he misspelled Feldman, my own nephew, Leonard. So I've got a boatload of David Ferdman Show hoodies, David Ferdman Show T-shirts, and David Ferdman Show cups like this one. If you want to support this insanity, what else? Still a Democrat. This is my favorite. It's the Made in Los Estados Unidos coffee cup. You want to support American manufacturing, pick up a Made in Los Estados Unidos coffee cup. Please like this episode and share it. As many of you know, I'm being throttled, and not to heighten my orgasm. It's a different type of throttling. Facebook is throttling me because they say there's too much sexual content in this show. Maybe scatological. I do scatological jokes. Oh, I have a picture. J.D. Vance was in Switzerland pretending to negotiate peace with the Iranians. And whenever J.D. Vance is in Switzerland, he visits looted Nazi gold at the Bank of Switzerland and just salutes it. All right. What was I talking? I should wrap it up. It's been long enough. Is what she said. That's what she said. She said it. That's what she said. Can you imagine having me as a father, being stuck in a car with your friends, and I'm just singing, when they say anything, that's what she said. That's what she said. She, not Chinese president, she. Maybe she said it, but it's hard to, what do they say in China when someone says, boy, that was long? If you say that's what she said, you're probably going to get arrested. What do they say? What do idiots in China say when somebody says, oh, it's thick? That's what Deng Xiaoping said. Okay, I shouldn't have done a show. I was feeling good for a second. I was actually feeling good for a second. Do I want to keep talking? I got notes and slides in front of me. Do I want to keep talking? Here's our First Lady. That's our First Lady. Let's take a look at our First Lady. There we go. All right. Now Facebook is right about me. That's our first lady. Here's our president inciting an insurrection. And yeah, okay. Let's see. Well, yeah. No. Yeah. Do I want to talk about Kamala Harris, Benjamin Netanyahu, and our $1.5 trillion Pentagon budget? No. Maybe I'll talk about it next Saturday. This is good. I get things out of my system by talking about this stuff. All right, I'm going to wrap it up. I'm David Feldman, reminding you to stay strong and protect the weak. Please go to shopdavidfeldman.com and pick up some of my garbage or make a donation. Subscribe to my newsletter by going to davidfeldmanshow.com. What else? Subscribe to this channel. Leave a comment that helps the algorithm. This is an audio podcast, by the way, and you should really get out of the house if you can. Listen to this as an audio pod. You don't have to see my face. That's the added benefit. So wherever you get your audio, you should be listening to this show instead of looking at it. And leave a comment on whatever. Just do what everybody asks you to do. Thank you to Bob and Mila in the chat room. We had fun the other night with the meetup on Zoom. I'm going to do more of them because I have no life. This is why I did tonight's show. I have no life. The Zoom meetup was great. It was great, and you don't need Zoom. You register, and if you just want to listen in, you can call in on your phone. And no, you don't need Zoom. We don't look at you. We don't see your face. I don't want to see your face. I don't want to see my face. Goodbye. I'll see everybody live Sunday night at 6:05 p.m. Eastern. Go to shopdavidfeldman.com and pick up Hope You're in the Mood for Diarrhea chef's apron for your 4th of July barbecue. What better way to usher in our sesquicentennial? Is that what it is? Our Susquehanna, our 250th birthday than wearing I Hope You're in the Mood for Diarrhea chef's apron. How better to honor our president and our first lady, that's our first lady, America's first lady. Shut up, David. Just shut up. Shut up, David. Just